Welcome to The Debate. Today, we are analyzing the critically acclaimed Life is Strange universe, and we're diving deep into the two central romantic and platonic dynamics of its most polarizing character, Chloe Price.
Right, a really fascinating character.
Absolutely. So, the central question we are exploring today is a really profound one. If we look closely at the narrative, which relationship represents the more transformative, foundational bond for Chloe? Is it her connection with Max Caulfield or her intensely volatile dynamic with Rachel Amber?
And it's vital to establish right off the bat that this discourse, it emerges directly from the source material. We are looking at the textual evidence from the games, the environmental storytelling, the journals, and the broader narrative frameworks the developers built.
Exactly. We have to stick to the text.
Right, because this is about examining how two entirely different relationship architectures function for a young woman who is, fundamentally broken by grief.
Precisely. And I'll be arguing for the dynamic known as Pricefield, which is the relationship between Max and Chloe.
Okay.
If you really look at the arc of the story, this relationship is the emotional bedrock of the whole narrative. It represents a grounding, enduring soulmate connection. It's the anchor that ultimately allows Chloe to survive and move forward into adulthood.
And I will be advocating for Amberprice, the bond between Rachel and Chloe. I'm coming from the perspective that this is a vital, passionate, almost twin flame connection that was forged in mutual trauma.
A twin flame, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't just a teenage fling. It was an absolutely necessary catalyst that literally kept Chloe alive during the darkest, most isolated period of her life.
Okay, so let's start by looking at how Max and Chloe's relationship operates. They are, as the game explicitly frames them, partners in time.
Which is a great tagline, by the way.
Oh, totally. But what makes this bond so resilient is how their psychological differences perfectly balance one another to create a sustainable ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
You have Max, who is this shy, highly observant, gentle photographer. And then you have Chloe, who is brash, cynical, and operates with a fiercely guarded, almost aggressive exterior.
Very aggressive, yeah.
Right, but in practice, Max's gentle nature mellows Chloe out. She actively pulls her back from the brink of total self-destruction. And conversely, Chloe pulls Max out of her shell. She demands that she take up space and assert herself in the world.
Sure. They complement each other.
They do. But the ultimate proof of this bond is in the narrative stakes. Max literally tears apart the fabric of time and space to save Chloe. The iconic kiss in the storm and the ultimate bay over bay choice stand as proof of a stable, unconditional love that provides Chloe with the safe harbor she was denied since childhood.
I understand the appeal of that kind of stability, I really do. But we really have to look at what preceded it. Rachel and Chloe's bond is an undeniably magnetic connection forged in the absolute fires of shared trauma.
The fires of trauma.
Exactly. After Chloe's father, William, died in that car crash, Chloe was entirely alone. She was spiraling, and Rachel was the angel, as Chloe herself explicitly calls her, who stepped in and saved Chloe from a remarkably dark path.
She did step in, yes.
Right. They were the junkyard queens who accepted each other with zero judgment. When you look at the magical, spontaneous romance of the Tempest play scene in the prequel, that isn't just teenage rebellion. That is raw, explosive chemistry.
It's definitely explosive.
It gave Chloe a tangible reason to get out of bed in the morning during her most desperate years. It was a reason to live, basically.
To truly evaluate the depth of these relationships, though, we have to examine the circumstances under which they were formed.
Okay, fair.
Specifically, we need to look at presence versus absence. Who was actually there for Chloe when her world collapsed?
Exactly. And this is where the foundation of Max and Chloe's relationship reveals its deepest fracture. You talk about Max being this ultimate safe harbor, but Max's entire foundation with teenage Chloe is built on a massive, glaring abandonment.
I wouldn't call it...
Max moved away and ghosted Chloe for 5 years immediately after William's tragic death. We're talking about a time when Chloe's life was completely shattered, and the geographic reality here is damning.
Damning is a strong word.
But it's true. Seattle is only a 4 to 5 hour drive from Arcadia Bay, yet Max never visited. She stopped texting, she just vanished.
Well, they were kids.
Let me just finish this thought. Because what is perhaps most difficult to reconcile is that when Max finally returns to Arcadia Bay to attend Blackwell Academy, she actively avoids reaching out to Chloe for weeks.
That is true, she does delay.
Right. She only reconnects because she literally stumbles into Chloe getting shot in the girls' bathroom. Rachel, conversely, intervened. When Chloe had absolutely no one, when her mother was moving on with an abusive stepfather and David Madsen, Rachel became Chloe's lifeline. She didn't hide, she was present.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on that absence.
Please do.
We have to contextualize who Max Caulfield was at that time. When William died, Max was 13 years old. We are talking about the early 2000s. 13-year-olds do not have the autonomy, the financial resources, or the emotional maturity to navigate a friend's severe complex PTSD and overwhelming grief.
That's fair, she was young.
Exactly. Max wasn't acting out of malice. She was paralyzed by her own inadequacy. She was a child experiencing secondary trauma who physically froze. Was ghosting Chloe the wrong way to handle it?
Yes, definitely.
Absolutely, yes. And Max carries an immense, agonizing guilt over it throughout the entire narrative. But when she returns, we must judge her by her actions.
Which start with ignoring her for weeks.
Initially, sure, out of shame, but once that connection is reestablished, she consistently shows up. She repeatedly steps in front of bullets. She navigates predatory adults. She alters the cosmos.
She does use her powers a lot. For her, yes.
The narrative brilliantly uses Max's time-traveling powers as a literal, mechanical manifestation of her desire to make amends for her past paralysis. She proves her loyalty not through an easy, convenient presence when things are fun, but through active, incredibly difficult sacrificial choices.
That's a fascinating way to look at the time travel mechanic, framing it as a physical manifestation of guilt.
It really is.
But even if we view it as her fixing her past mistakes, it doesn't erase the fact that those 5 years of absence fundamentally broke Chloe. But let's move away from how these relationships started. Let's talk about how they actually functioned in practice, the day-to-day dynamic between the characters.
I think that's where Pricefield proves its long-term viability. The dynamic between Max and Chloe is at its core sustainable. Max acts as a crucial grounding force.
Grounding or restricting?
Grounding. She is one of the very few people in Chloe's life who is actually willing to reprimand her when her emotions spiral into destructive behavior.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, when Chloe wants to steal the disability fund money from the principal's office, or when she recklessly plays with a loaded gun in the junkyard, Max actively pushes back. There is a beautiful recurring analogy here, comparing Max to a dandelion in the spring.
Ah, the dandelion.
Yes, Max represents the bright promise of rebirth, the idea that life can go on and be good again after a harsh winter. Rachel, on the other hand, was a dangerous, uncontained fire. She pulled Chloe deeper into rebellion, feeding into a nihilistic, nothing matters attitude that only accelerated Chloe's self-destruction.
I come at it from a different way entirely. You use the word fire as a pejorative, almost as a synonym for mindless destruction.
Because it was destructive.
But let's reframe the fire metaphor using the game's own textual evidence, because it's a huge motif. William himself, in Chloe's dream sequences, talks about the blinding beauty of fire.
He does say that.
And if you think about it biologically, look at Serotinus pine cones. The game touches on this kind of natural mechanism. These cones literally cannot open and release their seeds to start new life unless they are exposed to the extreme, devastating heat of a forest fire.
Oh, that's an interesting connection.
Right? Rachel's intensity wasn't just chaos for the sake of chaos. It was a necessary biological and psychological catalyst. Chloe was in a deadlock of grief. She was frozen, rotting away in that junkyard right alongside the broken cars.
That's a vivid image.
Rachel was the fire that burned away the deadwood, forcing Chloe to thaw out, to feel anger, to feel passion, to feel alive again. Without that intense heat, the seed of Chloe's survival never opens.
That is a really elegant metaphor. But we can't ignore the tangible damage that fire caused while it was burning. We have to examine the limitations and the darker realities of these bonds.
Okay, let's go there.
Rachel Amber was undeniably a social chameleon, and we must address the sheer toxicity of her behavior toward Chloe. The hard textual evidence shows that Rachel lived a secret life.
She kept things separate, yes.
She dated Frank Bowers, a volatile drug dealer, and she became intimately involved with Mark Jefferson, all behind Chloe's back. Rachel actively hid her inner life from the person who worshipped her.
It's complicated, though.
If you analyze the psychology there, she used Chloe's absolute devotion as a comfortable baseline, a stepping stone in her desperate, overarching bid to escape Arcadia Bay. That isn't just chaotic, it is a fundamental betrayal of trust that left Chloe even more broken when she finally learned the truth.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. That is an incredibly reductive view of a deeply traumatized youth.
Reductive how?
We are talking about a girl who was 15 and 16 during the events of the prequel and judging her with the moral absolutism of a healthy adult. Rachel was dealing with severe family trauma, the shocking revelation that her entire life was a lie, discovering her biological mother's identity, and subsequent addiction issues.
Those are valid struggles, absolutely.
Furthermore, if you look at her involvement with Frank and Jefferson, it is heavily coded with the dynamics of grooming by older predatory men. Traumatized teenagers often subconsciously seek out situations where they are controlled or victimized to mirror their internal chaos.
That's a very fair psychological read.
She wasn't an evil mastermind. She was a victim of her circumstances, desperately trying to find a way out. And her decision to keep those secrets from Chloe was born out of a misplaced, desperate desire to protect Chloe from that darkness, not out of malice. She knew Chloe idolized her, and she didn't want to tarnish the pedestal Chloe put her on.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because protecting someone does not usually involve planning to leave town without them, which we know Rachel was considering.
She was desperate to get out.
But even if we grant Rachel the immense grace of her trauma, we have to contrast that dynamic with Max's fundamental honesty with Chloe once they reunite.
Honesty, that's an interesting word choice.
How so?
Let's talk about Max's supposed purity and honesty. Max actively uses her rewind powers to manipulate conversations. This happens constantly in the gameplay loop.
Well, that's just a game mechanic.
It's narrative too. She discovers what people want to hear, rewinds time, and parrots their own desires back to them to engineer affection and agreement. That is a literal form of emotional manipulation. Max is not a flawless saint. She controls the flow of reality to make sure Chloe and everyone else likes her.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. I don't see Max's use of her powers as malicious manipulation.
What else would you call it?
If we look at the mechanics of why she does it, it's driven by an intense, almost paralyzing social anxiety. It's a trauma response. She is terrified of saying the wrong thing and losing Chloe again, just like she did when she moved to Seattle.
So she lies to prevent loss.
The rewind power is essentially a psychological crutch for a teenager who is pathologically afraid of rejection. When Max rewinds to say the right thing, she is desperately trying to mend the bridge she broke 5 years ago. When Rachel lies, she is maintaining a dangerous double life.
I still think it's manipulative.
But stepping back from their individual moral failings for a moment, let's look at what these relationships ultimately signify in the broader scope of Chloe's life. What is their thematic legacy? Because this is where I think the Bay over Bay choice really cements Pricefield as the definitive relationship.
Go on, because the weight of that final choice is undeniably massive.
It is the climax of the entire narrative. I argue that Pricefield represents a true soulmate dynamic. And I don't mean that in a fairy tale sense. I mean it as a profound intimacy rooted in ultimate loyalty and active choice.
Okay.
This relationship represents arriving at a place of safety. It's about reaching adulthood, and it is immortalized by that final decision. Max is presented with an impossible ethical dilemma. Let Chloe die to save Arcadia Bay, or sacrifice the entire town to keep Chloe alive.
The trolley problem, essentially.
Exactly. The fact that Bay over Bay is framed as the ultimate culmination of their bond shows that Max is willing to sacrifice her own innocence, the lives of thousands, and the very fabric of reality itself just to ensure Chloe has a future. It is a love that says, "You are worth more to me than the world." It pulls Chloe out of her belief that she is destined to be abandoned or killed.
That is a compelling argument. But have you considered that Amberprice represents a classic twin flame dynamic?
Tell me more about that.
In psychological and literary frameworks, twin flames are not necessarily meant to be peaceful life partners who walk off into the sunset. They are mirrors. Rachel and Chloe reflected each other's deepest pains.
Right, the trauma mirroring.
Yes. Chloe reflected Rachel's loss of innocence regarding her parents, the realization that the adults in her life were liars. And Rachel reflected Chloe's intense, deep-seated fear of abandonment. The purpose of a twin flame is to burn extraordinarily hot, to force all of that hidden emotional baggage to the surface so it can be incinerated.
Even if it burns them up too?
Exactly. Yes, it was chaotic. Yes, it ended in a devastating, horrific tragedy in the darkroom. But the relationship's narrative purpose was not to last forever. It was a beautiful, explosive first love that paved the way for Chloe to eventually process her grief. If you think about it, without Rachel, Chloe never makes it far enough to even see Max again. Rachel kept her breathing.
That is a really poignant way to look at it. Rachel kept her breathing so Max could eventually help her live.
Yes, precisely.
So bringing our perspectives together, how do we summarize the legacy of these two monumental bonds? For my part, the dynamic between Max and Chloe stands as the narrative's emotional anchor. It is a testament to enduring loyalty, the profound power of making amends, and a love that literally defies time, space, and fate to offer a grieving girl the safe harbor she was so brutally denied. It is the destination Chloe was always trying to reach.
And I maintain that the relationship between Rachel and Chloe is a fiercely realistic, unflinching depiction of teenage trauma bonding. It was a vital, explosive connection that saved Chloe's life in her absolute darkest hour.
It certainly did.
Rachel taught Chloe how to feel, how to rebel, and how to love fiercely in a world that had seemingly abandoned her. If Max is the destination, Rachel is the necessary burning catalyst that started the journey.
It seems we find a significant point of convergence here. Human connections, especially those forged in the fires of youth and severe trauma, are deeply complex.
Highly complex, yeah.
They don't fit neatly into boxes of good or bad. The brilliance of the Life is Strange narrative is that it masterfully presents two entirely different yet equally profound forms of love.
Exactly. It forces us to confront the reality that love is rarely pristine. It is messy. It is sometimes selfish, it involves devastating mistakes, but it is often desperately needed for survival. We don't necessarily have to view these relationships as a competition where one must defeat the other.
Right, it's not a zero-sum game.
No. They are sequential, incredibly vital chapters in Chloe Price's life. Each served a distinct, necessary purpose in her psychological evolution.
There is certainly far more nuance to explore within this material. From the psychological mechanisms of grief to the deeper implications of time manipulation as a metaphor for regret. We've only really scratched the surface of how trauma dictates our connections.
Absolutely.
But as we sign off today, it's clear that the story of Chloe Price is a testament to how the people we love shape the very reality we live in. Thank you for listening.